I almost took my bench chair and brought this one to him. Because that's one of the original ones that I got when I first came. It's a great chair.
I would say they make special court reporter chairs that have like really nice seats on them and their backs. They're a little spendy, but it's probably worth it with as much as I sit in.
But court reporters complain about other stuff.
Oh no,
I learned a long time ago, chairs instrumental to your success.
It's on the other side.
Got it.
You ready, Judge?
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, can you approach real quick? Covering the jury when they're coming in.
Oh, I've already got them coming through the door. We're going to do it on the side.
Just a side, I don't think it's going to record, so it's just
Did we hit it on the record?
I don't think so. Mr. Bias?
Y'all can be seated. We just need one more second. Talk amongst each other. Thanks, guys.
Kind of maybe get set up before you started on the frames.
Doctor, remember you're still under oath.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Continue on.
Judge, for the record, the defense withdraws the objection.
Okay.
So, to get us back to where we were, Leslie Bowman is running reports, right?
Correct.
The parameters 500 or above of fentanyl outside the OR. Do you know if these patients were on ventilators?
I believe they were, yes.
Okay. And how many doctors in the whole system are doing this?
Just one.
And who is that doctor?
Dr. Husel.
All right. What happens next? I think we left off chronologically with the timeline. You, on Monday, November 26th, meet with Dr. Husel and Dr. Ralston. What happens next?
Well, I had the conversation with Dr. Strack. Later that week, I also spoke to Dr. Philip Santa Emma, who is the medical director of the palliative care program at Mount Carmel. He is also the past president of the medical staff. I spoke to him about what we had found to get his input into what he thought about these drugs at these dosages. Because he's a palliative care physician, he has lots of experience at palliative extubation, taking care of terminally ill patients. I spoke to him. I spoke to Dr. Dominic again to get more information from him in terms of his opinion.
You mentioned Dr. Dominic. Who is Dr. Dominic, and what does he do at the hospital?
Dr. Dominic is the chairman of the Department of Anesthesiology at the time.
All right. What happens next? So this is that you had two conversations with Dr. Dominic, the chair of anesthesiology. What happens next?
There is also a meeting that occurs during that week with system executives to talk about the situation. That would be the CEO, Ed Lamb, General Counsel for Mount Carmel Health, Dr. Streck. I believe he called in other VPMAs from other hospitals, so they're made aware of the situation. And I frankly can't remember anyone else that was there, although I'm sure there were. So we had conversations about this, about ongoing investigation, informing the parent company, Trinity, as to what's going on.
I'm going to stop.
Those were the topics. Excuse me?
I'm going to stop you there, Doctor. Yeah, this is the first time you've mentioned the parent company, Trinity. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you can, the structural organization of Mount Carmel as far as whether they are an independent company, what a parent company is, etc.?
Sure. As we discussed previously, Mount Carmel is a health system of its own, but it is also owned and operated by a larger national health system, Trinity Health, which owns, I don't know how many, close to 100 hospitals nationally and some other health systems nationally, but they are the owner and the parent corporation of Mount Carmel Health.
And what date, if you can recall, was, to your knowledge, Trinity informed of Dr. Husel's dosing habits during palliative extubations in the nighttime ICU?
I don't know. The meeting that I attended with Mount Carmel Health executives occurred about the 28th of November, I believe, and it was discussed, but I was not part of actually informing them. So from the point that it was discussed that we need to do that, I believe they were informed after that meeting at some point, but I can't tell you exactly when.
Okay. What happens next in your mind's eye, looking back, big meeting around November 28th, what happens next?
The next thing I recall is the following week, which was December 4th. I was called into an executive meeting with the CEO, as well as the Dr. Streck, the Chief Clinical Officer for the health system. I was informed that an external peer review of some of these cases had been performed, and the review,
Okay.
I won't talk about what I was told about the review.
Doctor, stop.
You said you were informed that an external peer review? Is that the word you used?
Yes.
Tell us what an external peer review is.
That's an evaluation of the care of a patient or patients that is performed by a peer, just like we spoke about peer review earlier. But this time it is a doctor or group of doctors that are not part of the Mount Carmel Health System.
Okay. So that happens. What happens next?
I was given a letter by the CEO to deliver to Dr. Husel that informed him of a summary suspension of his privileges at Mount Carmel Health.
What date, if you recall, did that occur on?
I was given the letter on the 4th of December. Then I delivered it to Dr. Husel on the 5th of December.
And when you say delivered, was this something you mailed, emailed, texted? How did you deliver it to them?
I contacted him and asked him to come to my office, and he came to my office on the 5th of December, and I hand-delivered the letter to him. There were 2 copies of it. He was asked to sign 1 copy and return it to me so I could return it for his file at the system office.
Okay. So is he fired yet?
No, strictly about his privileges to practice at the hospital.
What happens next?
There were also ongoing, there had been several meetings of executives within the hospital. I spoke about the one on the 28th. I also attended other meetings. And there were conversations in those meetings at that point about communication. Who should this be communicated to? How should it be communicated to? And a decision was made to inform law enforcement about this. And I was asked to be a part of that communication to them. And so on the later on December 5th, I, along with Sean McKibben, I believe Hospital General Counsel was there, but I can't say that for sure, met with the county prosecutor and one of his attorneys.
Would that have been Ron O'Brien and Jimmy Lowe, if you recall?
Yes, it would.
All right. What happened next?
After that meeting with them, the 2 days later on the 7th of December, Columbus police detectives came to Mount Carmel. I met with them, and they said they wanted to talk to hospital personnel that were involved with the care of these patients, and they began to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, when did they want to talk to them?
As soon as possible. They started, I believe, that day.
Had any of these personnel been talked to about what was going on regarding Dr. Husel and the investigation you and your colleagues were conducting?
I am not sure. I don't have a list of who they spoke to. It occurred on, much of that, the interviewing occurred on the floor next door to my office, so I saw nurses and pharmacists coming and going into that room with the detectives, but they did not give me a list or tell me exactly who they were talking to.
All right. What happened next?
I attended several meetings that occurred on a daily basis that included Mount Carmel Health executives as well as Trinity Health executives, and so there were ongoing conversations about the status of the situation, communication, who should be communicated, what should be communicated, how should that be communicated. So there were several discussions about that. I was not involved in decision making, but was involved in the plan to communicate. It was decided that patients' families should be communicated about what we had discovered and what occurred, and a script was put together, and I was asked to be involved with the communication to patient families along with several other physicians. I believe we began to do that shortly after Christmas in December.
You said a script was put together to talk to family patients, to the patients' families that were affected?
Yes, so that the intent was there be consistent communication so everyone heard the same thing, and it was an intent, I believe, I was told, to...
Okay, sustained. Let's, as of the intent issue, go ahead.
All right. Well,
Yes.
I believe you're explaining, I asked why a script was put together. And can you explain why a script was put together?
Objection. He said he did not have any input on the script.
I think he said he did.
I think you did. So, Doctor, can you answer the question?
I can. The intent of the script was to make sure there was...
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Let me see. You're talking about your understanding of what the intent was?
Yes.
Okay.
Your understanding of the intent was?
That there be consistency in the communication so everyone heard the same thing. And there was also several points that needed to be made, and some aspects that we were instructed not to talk about.
All right. And did you actually yourself participate in any of these phone calls to patient families?
Yes, I did.
All right. Do you recall who else was involved in calling patient families regarding the dosing habits of Dr. Husel in the nighttime ICU during palliative extubations?
The chief nursing officer, Dina Bush, was making some of these phone calls. Dr. Santa Emma, the palliative care medical director, was involved. Dr. Streck made a few calls. I believe Dr. Tom Brady made a few calls. Dr. Brady is a hospitalist and he was president of the medical staff at the time.
All right.
There may have been others, but I don't remember who else may have been making phone calls.
Why, if you know...
Excuse me, I do remember. I'm sorry. Dr. Ralston made some of these phone calls too. I just remembered.
And Dr. Ralston, you identified as the head of the ICU that you were trying to get a hold of when this first broke?
Yes, he was medical director of the ICU.
All right. And why, if you know, your understanding, why are you contacting these patient families at this time?
Objection.
Hold on.
Okay, I'll permit it. You can answer the question.
There was a consensus that Mount Carmel wanted to be transparent about finding this,
Objection.
and it was
Hold on.
the patient
Doctor, I'm going to
families.
stop you there, please. There's an objection.
Denied. Doctor, do you remember where you were at?
Yes. There was a decision that Mount Carmel wanted to be transparent about finding this, and we felt that the patients' families deserved to know when we had discovered areas of concern regarding their loved ones' care, especially with an issue like this, that it was felt may have actually shortened the lives of these patients.
Okay, stop for a second. I'm going to talk to the jury. We're talking about a process of what they're going through, okay? Of where they may do something. That's the purpose for you to consider this. Do you understand that? Okay? Mr. Zion.
What happens next?
These patient phone calls take a long time to conduct. It takes several days trying to find next of kin, trying to contact them. It's not necessarily an easy, straightforward process, but that's accomplished. There is also communication that's put together that around the Mount Carmel colleagues, the employees, as well as to release to the media and go from there to the public.
All right. So I'm going to ask about something a little different now, so I don't forget. We had talked about Dr. Husel's not being board certified, but on track to be board certified when he was hired. Remember that?
Yes, yes.
And then you testified, all this came to light, and he is suspended when you hand-delivered that letter to him on December 5th of 2018.
Yes.
When he is suspended, had he taken the test to become board certified at this point?
No, he had not.
And he had been at the hospital at this point for 5 years?
That's correct.
All right. So at this point, should he have been board certified in anesthesiology to continue his employment?
Yes.
What, if anything, is being done about his lack of board certification, either prior to or simultaneous with the events of October, November, December of 2018?
Dr. Husel's appointment to the medical staff was set to expire in December of 2018. So a few months earlier, he had filled out an application for reappointment to the medical staff, as is typical for most physicians if they want to stay on the medical staff. That application is then processed and researched, and it was determined that he had not achieved his board certification at that point. So he was presented to the Credentials Committee, and he was notified that he was now outside the guidelines and the requirements of the medical staff for board certification. He had followed up with a letter requesting a waiver to allow him to take his board certification exam. In that letter, he had indicated that he had already scheduled to take it in May of 2019. So that was looked at his reappointment meeting with the Credentials Committee, and that waiver was approved. It's very typical to approve those waivers, and so that was consistent with how that had been dealt with other medical staff members in the past. So that waiver was approved for 1 year. So he was not required to be board certified, but was allowed to take the board certification exam, and within 1 year that would be looked at again, and he should be board certified by then.
So in fairness to Dr. Husel, that is nothing extraordinary that a new doctor after 5 years would be asking for a waiver for a year just to get the test done.
It's not that common, but it does happen, I would say probably a half dozen times a year.
All right. Now, is that what you do? That tract of recertification and all that jazz, is that what you're doing at the same time you're investigating them, or are those other people doing that?
Well, I do sit on the Credentials Committee. It is the credentialing office that tracks all of that and determines if criteria and requirements have been followed and presents that to the Credentials Committee. I do sit on the Credentials Committee. I did sit on the Credentials Committee at that time. So I was present for that. So I heard all of that presentation.
All right. And after he was suspended on December 5th, was he thereafter re-credentialed to be on the Mount Carmel hospital staff?
No.
What happens next after these phone calls are made to the patients' families that were affected by the dosing habits of Dr. Husel in the nighttime ICU?
We continue to investigate. As I said, other communication plans are put together, continue to meet on a regular basis, and eventually in January, I was put on administrative leave and taken out of the loop, so to speak.
You say communication plans were developed. What is that? Who's doing that?
Well, most of those, just like the script that we talked about earlier, most of those were put together by the communications department. They involved video recordings that would be made, that the plan was to show those to Mount Carmel colleagues, also a video to be made to be released to the media, and then of course with anticipation was the media would show this to the public. There was some education about interacting with the press and the media that was done to those of us that might be involved in that.
All right. And so Mount Carmel has its own department that deals with this?
It does have a communications department, although there was external consultants contracted to deal with this issue. This was above and beyond what the typical experience and requirements were for our communications department.
You said outside, what was the word, outside consultants?
Yes.
So like a public relations firm, is that a way to put it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Not associated with Mount Carmel?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you speak to any of these public relation firms hired by the hospital to deal with this?
I was involved with them in some of the education programs that were put together and some of the discussions about what needed to be, they asked my opinion about what needed to be communicated to the various constituents that these different communication plans were being designed for. So I interacted with a few of them.
All right. Are you aware of whether or not, besides law enforcement, any other authorities were notified by Mount Carmel or Trinity Health?
Yes, there's a requirement because of certain certifications, and since we had this, we had to notify CMS,
What's CMS?
which is who Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It's the federal government that oversees and administers Medicare. We had to notify them. I believe we also notified the Board of Pharmacy about this. Board of Nursing was notified. Can't remember. We had to notify, I believe, the Board of Medicine, and we had to report to the National Practitioner Data Bank regarding Dr. Husel being suspended from the medical staff.
All right. So it wasn't just the police, it were all these other, in your world, authorities, regulatory bodies?
That's correct.
And when you say we notified, is that you proactively reaching out to them, or are they coming to you and saying, we want to know what's going on?
Mount Carmel took the initiative and notified them themselves. They didn't wait to be contacted.
All right, Doctor, I'm just going to ask you a few more questions here. You got to the point in your memory of the chronology of what happened by saying you're being involved in the communication efforts, etc. And then what happens in January to you, employment-wise?
On January 25th, I was put on administrative leave.
What does that mean?
Well, that means that I'm still employed by the organization, but have no responsibilities, and basically I was told to not come to work anymore until further notice.
All right. How long did that administrative leave last?
Until July 11th.
What, if anything, happened on July, and this is 2019?
That's correct.
What, if anything, happened on July 11th, 2019?
I was called into a meeting with Mount Carmel Health System executives and terminated.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time, Doctor.
Mr. Bias, you need, what, 10 minutes to get set up?
Yes, please.
We'll take a quick 10-minute break, ladies and gentlemen, and get back to it. Remember the admonition?
All right.
Have a great 10 minutes.
Do you need any of this stuff up here?
Yeah, you can do it all.
Okay.
I believe so.
Mr. Zion?
Yeah, Judge, just so long as a proper foundation is laid prior to anything being shown to the jury. That was my only concern with the logistics of this. And I've been assured by Mr. Baez that will be, nothing's going to be shown of him saying, I don't know what that is, and then,
And what's this over here on the side?
That's in case I need to write something down, Judge. rather than switch off to the Elmo, I figure I could write it down just as easily, quicker, kind of flow a little easier. If I need to write something down.
So it's demonstrative in purpose?
Just demonstrative.
Okay, let's see how this works.
All rise.
You may be seated. Doctor, you're still under oath. Mr. Bynes, you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir. May I please report?
In May?
Mr. Zion. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I hope that's not a precursor to what's about to go. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Dr. Swanner, you are actually in the Arena District right now, right?
Yes, right now.
Okay, you're in the law firm of Mount Carmel?
I'm in the law firm of Jones Day.
Well, you're in the law firm that represents Mount Carmel, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I believe they do.
I'm gonna give him a little leeway here, but
Now, I understand your back issues, but there was nothing that precluded you from arriving at your lawyer's office today, was there?
I don't understand the question.
Well, I'll just come right out and ask you. Is the reason you're there on Zoom versus live here in court is because perhaps cross-examination might not go so smoothly?
Objection, Your Honor.
sustained argumentative.
Are you aware of, was the decision made to be present at your lawyer's office a few blocks away as opposed to coming here live in court had anything to do with cross-examination?
No.
Okay. Now, but as so far we're good as far as your back is concerned today, right?
So far, so good.
Okay, if you have any issues, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to pause my examination. Okay?
Thank you.
All right,
Yes.
sir. I'm going to try and go chronologically and see if we can, and I'll try not to bounce around too much. Picking up where Mr. Zion mentioned about Dr. Husel's board certifications, fact of the matter is he actually took the written portion of the board certification, correct?
You mean prior to reappointment?
Correct, yes.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And in fact, he passed that on the first try, correct?
I don't recall if it was first try or not.
Okay. But you were aware he passed, right?
Yes,
Okay. And that all he had left was the oral portion of that exam, correct?
that's correct.
And kind of hard to study for an oral portion of an exam if you're working full shifts over at the ICU, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
I can't answer. I don't know what his study habits are, how he felt he needed to prepare for that.
If you don't know, that's okay. That's an acceptable answer, okay? I'm going to ask you several other questions. So, taking some of what was covered in direct examination, you mentioned that none of the nurses had ever, in the 5 years employed with Mount Carmel, had ever come with any complaints about Dr. Husel, correct?
That's correct.
And no other physicians also ever complained about him.
That's correct.
No other pharmacists ever came to you and said, we got a problem with Dr. Husel.
That's correct.
And that was in 2014, 15, 16, 17, up until the October of 2018, correct?
Yes.
Now, in addition to that, his contract was renewed 2 times while working for Mount Carmel, correct?
I don't know details about his contract.
So you have no idea how many times Mount Carmel renewed his employment contract?
Action has to be
Sustained.
Would that be something that's under your supervision, sir?
No.
Okay. Now, in 2014, he was in fact given an award as Doctor of the Year, correct?
That's correct.
And this was given to him or recommended to be given by other physicians, correct?
I'm not sure exactly how that award was determined.
Okay. So
I thought it was nursing staff, but I don't know.
I'm going to show you what is a Defense Exhibit H1.
Okay.
And if you give us a moment, we're going to bring that up. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if you could scroll up just a little bit, David. Now, that's your signature on the bottom left-hand corner, correct?
Yes, it is.
So one could say that as far as Dr. Husel's concerned, you think at this time he's doing a pretty good job.
Yes.
Okay? And you're also aware that in 2018, he was nominated again for this award, wasn't he, sir?
I don't recall that.
And of course, that award was not given to him.
Objection, Your
Because-
Honor. The answer is I don't know anything about that. You don't
Okay, well, you're testifying, let's,
I'll move on, Judge. It's not important. So, sir, in addition to this, you actually met with Dr. Husel about 2 times a year to go over his care, correct?
It was not a review of his practice. It was more of a checking in, how are things going sort of meeting. So it wasn't really a review or performance evaluation.
And that's, but
is
that's
there
what,
a reason why the exhibit's
we
called?
can take that down. But doctor, that's typical of what you do with all physicians, right?
No, not all physicians.
Well, those in the
I
ICU.
specifically did that with the nighttime ICU physicians.
Okay. And you also met with Dr. Hagris a couple times a year,
Yes, the same meeting.
as well as other staff members at the ICU?
I don't recall meetings with other staff members necessarily. Dr. Ralston was present at those meetings, and there would be other staff meetings or other staff members at other meetings I would have, but not specifically for that I called or that I reached out to. There would be ICU quality meetings that I might attend that other staff members would also be in attendance. There were medical department meetings that physicians would be at that I would also attend. So I would interact with the medical staff.
I'm sorry, doctor. Let's stick to just my question, okay? My question was, you met with other healthcare professionals, and your answer was no?
My answer is,
Or you don't recall?
I wouldn't, well, no, I
Let
wouldn't.
him answer, okay? Go ahead, doctor.
Thank you. I would not schedule specific meetings with all other medical staff meetings the way I scheduled them with Dr. Husel and Dr. Hagris. So no, not like that, but yes, in other situations, I would meet with medical staff members.
And the purpose of your meeting with the doctors at ICU was just to check on how things were coming along and to see if there were any issues or any concerns to be discussed, correct?
That's correct.
And as far as you were made aware during these meetings, there was nothing of the kind to discuss.
That's correct.
Okay? And now, as far as your position is concerned, you are the Vice President of Medical Affairs, right?
Was, yes.
Okay, well, at this time, I'm talking about the relevant times.
Yes.
That's pretty high up there in terms of the chain of command at this hospital, is it not?
Yes, I would say one of the top 3 at the hospital administratively.
But as it related to the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, you were the man in charge, right?
Pharmacy and nursing did not report to me, no.
Obviously, you had significant input should an issue arise at the pharmacy, right?
If it impacted the medical care and the medical staff, yes.
Okay, so these were your people, right? The employees, the healthcare providers, the healthcare professionals at Mount Carmel were under your charge, correct, sir?
They did not all report to me. We were colleagues, we interacted, we worked together in a collegial fashion, but they did not report to me.
I'm not asking if they actually directly reported to you. My question, I guess, is you're in charge of them, though, correct? I mean, if something...
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm not even finished with the question.
Okay.
I'm trying to clarify it for the witness.
Ask the question.
Sure.
I'll note the objection for now.
If there's an issue as it relates to the medical care, these are your people, right?
Objection asked and answered.
I'll give it to him. Can you answer it, Doc?
I was available, and the leadership at Mount Carmel West all made ourselves available. If there were concerns or issues, yes, people could come to me and tell me about them. If it involved the medical care of patients and impacted, obviously, the medical staff, then yes, I would get involved in investigating and resolving those issues.
All right. So let's go over an issue then, sir. You testified under direct examination that the first report came in, and that was the first you had heard of it was on October 25th, 2018, correct?
That's correct.
And you stated that, and I want to make sure I got your statement correct, that the doses were dose amounts that the pharmacy had not seen before, correct? Remember testifying to that earlier?
I remember testifying to that. I don't remember my specific words, but yes, the pharmacy was concerned because these were much higher doses than they were used to seeing.
Okay.
Of these drugs.
But you learned later on that they, in fact, were used to seeing these doses, correct?
I'm sorry, could you define used to seeing?
Yes. You later on learned that this was Dr. Husel's routine practice to be aggressive with pain meds as it related to palliative withdrawals, correct?
Yes, I did.
So, and you were also aware, and you also learned that the pharmacy, that numerous pharmacists had approved both prospectively and retrospectively many of these patients' doses, correct?
Yes.
So when you told this jury earlier that the pharmacy had not seen these doses or that they were not used to them, it's not exactly true, is it, sir?
Objection, Your Honor. That was not his testimony.
I agree.
No, I'm talking about the fact, not his statement, Judge.
His statement, Your Honor, if we can
Well,
approach.
you're impeaching him, evidently attempting to.
No, Judge, I'm just pointing out that it's not true.
That was not his testimony, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Thank you.
All right. Now, sir, you are actually in a unique position because you were once a pharmacist, right?
That's correct.
And you were aware, well, you are aware that, of course, that these drugs that we're discussing are controlled substances, right?
Yes.
And you became aware that there was an issue at the pharmacy as far as not being in control of controlled substances, correct?
Yes.
And you're also aware that the pharmacy is has to answer to the DEA in reference to what they do, their procedures, and whether in fact they have control of controlled substances, correct?
Yes.
You're also aware that if the pharmacy is not in control of controlled substances, that this is a direct violation of the CMS, which is the Center of Medicaid and Medicare Services, correct?
Yes.
And you're also aware that the pharmacy would be in immediate jeopardy by CMS of being able to see patients who are Medicaid and Medicare service patients, correct?
They were at risk of that.
Yes, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, the pharmacy was placed in immediate jeopardy because of their lack of control of controlled substances, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you're a hospital administrator, right?
Yes.
You're aware that Mount Carmel can't operate without Medicaid and Medicare patients, right?
Correct.
And that could potentially shut the whole hospital down, right?
Yes, it could.
Now, I want to show you what the prosecutor showed you in 20F, the State's Exhibit 20F. He's going to bring that up right now. This is an email that was forwarded to you by Katie Barga, correct?
Yes.
Now, at this time, you see that she wanted to bring something to your attention with this email, right?
Yes.
And if you look at the last paragraph here, it says, I wanted to copy you as well since pharmacy is concerned that the nursing staff is overriding PICSIS to obtain and administer these meds. Do you see that?
Yes.
And she goes on to say, I will keep you updated on the progress and send you an optional invitation to this meeting. Do you see that?
Yes.
So, Ms. Barga is bringing to your attention at this point that there's something going on at the pharmacy, right?
Yes,
That's all. That's my question. Now, let me ask you this: was it brought to your attention that the pharmacists were concerned about potential diversion because of the way these meds were being scanned?
there was conversation about diversion after these three cases were brought to my attention.
Okay. And as a former pharmacist and the third guy in charge, that was pretty important for you, right?
Yes.
Now, you stated that you went over your testimony. Actually, let me ask you this. In any of your direct examination today, did you testify about anything going on at the pharmacy?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And having said, after you testified about the voice reports, and in fact, as part of the procedure of the voice reports, it's mandatory to bring it to the attention of the actual provider, correct? Which would be Dr. Husel.
I don't remember the exact regulatory rules around voice reports, but typically I would.
Okay, so I'm going to go over what's mandatory and what you do typically, since because of your answer, sir. You're aware that the physician has to be notified of a voice report within 48 hours of having a voice report lodged against him or her, correct?
I don't recall that.
Is that your typical way of doing business with voice reports, sir? To notify them within 48 hours?
Not necessarily, no.
So typically, how long does it take you to finally get to the person who people are complaining about?
It depends on the situation.
Okay, so let's talk about this situation then. You stated after receiving these voice reports, that you started an investigation yourself, right?
Yes. Yes.
You would agree that the best thing to do is to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, right?
Are you asking his opinion?
As someone investigating something, sir, best person to talk to is the actual doctor, right?
That's one of the factors involved.
Okay. Also a good idea to perhaps go over the medical records with the doctor, is it not?
Depends on the situation.
Okay.
Not all voice reports are about medical care that would have anything to do with a medical record.
I'm asking you, sir, specifically about your investigation that you said you conducted, that you told us today you conducted. My question to you, sir, is pretty good idea to go over the medical records and give the doctor a chance to explain himself, right?
Yes?
And it's also a pretty good idea to get these records, right?
What do you mean by get the records?
Before I ask you that, you didn't do that in your investigation, did you, sir?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you're talking about, I'm talking about earlier. Not until after he was placed on leave did you talk to him, correct?
It was after he was taken off of the schedule that I talked to him.
He was in fact placed on leave on, I'll get the exact date for you. Look that up. Sir, do you know the date that Dr. Husel was officially placed on leave while we're looking this up?
We made the decision to take him off the schedule on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, November 21st, 2018.
And was it not decided at the executive meeting on the 19th that he would be placed on leave?
No, that was decided on the 21st.
Okay.
If you're
So, let me
equating
stop
leave
there.
with being...
I request the witness be allowed to answer.
Let's stop and answer your question.
You would agree, sir, that November 21st is before November 26th when you actually met with Dr. Husel, right?
Yes.
So before ever placing this doctor on leave, a person that works for you under your supervision, you never even spoke to him, right?
That's correct.
And you never even spoke to the nurses who were present at the bedside on any of these patients, did you, sir?
No, I did not.
You also, as part of your investigation into the matter, never went and spoke to the pharmacists who had either prospectively or retrospectively or simultaneously approved these meds, correct?
Correct.
And you would characterize this investigation as a thorough one, sir?
I would.
Okay. Sir, you realized at the time of you conducting this investigation that one, it was a serious matter, correct?
Of course.
And you're talking about patients, which is a serious matter?
Yes.
And you're talking about the life and career of one of your employees, that's a serious matter?
Yes.
Okay. And yet, you didn't find it necessary to speak to the doctor himself or any of the nurses or pharmacists or witnesses who were involved in any of these patients, did you, sir?
Eventually, I talked to Dr. Husel, but you're correct. I didn't talk to him before he was put on leave.
Okay. Now, you did say that you looked at the patient's charts prior to the meeting, correct?
That's correct.
So you had a little more information as far as only what was put in the records, right?
Correct.
Now, you would agree, sir, that many of your employees, well, all of your employees are different, right?
Yes.
And some are good at their entering progress notes in the medical records, and some are not so thorough, right?
That's correct.
And what a nurse, doctor, pharmacist, or other healthcare provider puts in a medical record is completely what they think might be relevant, right?
I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as an opinion.
I guess what I'm trying to get at, Dr. Swanner, is there's only so much you can get from a medical record, right?
That's true.
Okay? Now, in fact, the best way to find out what's going on with a patient is to speak to those who are actually at the bedside, right?
Not necessarily.
Would you agree that it would be good to know what those at bedside are saying?
Depends on their memory and their motives.
Okay. Well, we'll get into motives in a bit, but let's stick to the investigation that you conducted. Now, you stated that you met with Dr. Husel on the 26th after he had been placed on leave, right?
That's correct.
And in fact, sir, when Mr. Zion was questioning you, you testified under oath that Dr. Husel's demeanor, you were asked about his demeanor. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that he was passive, but participated and was collegial. That's how you described Dr. Husel's demeanor at this meeting today in court under oath, right?
That's correct.
Do you recall having to give a statement to the police as to what occurred at that meeting?
Yes.
And you labeled it note to chart?
Excuse me?
You labeled that statement note to chart.
Yes, I did.
Okay. It's a little bit of a medical term to be given to the police, right?
Note to chart?
Yes.
I don't consider that medical. I don't know.
Well, having said that, you in fact told the police, after being confronted about whether Dr. Husel was, his doses were perhaps hastening the death of patients, you said Dr. Husel seemed shocked by the comment. Correct?
Yes?
Okay. And that's not passive, is it?
My description of him being passive did not mean in a specific moment. It meant the overall meaning.
But you
He was
didn't
not
tell-
aggressive.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I cut you off. Please continue.
He was not aggressive. He wasn't pacing. He didn't stand up and pound on the table or anything like that. Yes, he was shocked, and that's not necessarily a passive reaction. But overall in the meeting, his demeanor was rather passive.
Okay, I didn't ask you, I don't believe the prosecutor asked you if he was aggressive or violent. I'm asking, I believe he asked you for your demeanor, correct?
Okay.
Yes,
Did I
I'm
hear an
defining
objection?
passive.
Okay, stop, Doc. Reason?
Argumentative, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question.
I'll move on. I don't really know how that was argumentative. I asked him.
Okay, I made my ruling, okay?
Okay. Sir, you also gave an interview to Human Resources about that meeting, did you not?
I spoke to a human resource person from Trinity.
Correct. And when describing Dr. Husel's demeanor during that meeting, you said he was sad, contrite, and sincere. Did you not, sir?
I don't recall the specific words I used in that meeting.
Okay. But you wouldn't argue with the fact that perhaps you told Human Resources that Dr. Husel was sad, contrite, and sincere, correct?
True.
Now, in your two-page or one-page or one-paragraph statement to the police, you don't say anything about him being passive here, correct?
I would have to look at the document. I don't remember especially what's in it.
Okay, I believe we emailed your lawyer a copy of that note to chart. Do you want to take a moment to
Yes.
review it? Do you feel you need to do that? To know that you never
Yes.
say anything about passive
Okay,
here?
stop. Proper question.
I think I finished the question, Judge.
No, then you strike the question, you disregard the question. If you're going to do what you're doing, do it right format.
Yes, sir. Do you feel you need to look it over, sir? Or do you feel comfortable?
Yes, please.
Okay. I believe, how close is your lawyer to you right now?
Okay.
I have the document in
Hold
front of me.
on, stop. Do you have the document in front of you? Review it, and then we'll ask you if it refreshes your memory.
Okay.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, it does.
Go ahead, then.
Did you say anything about him being passive, sir?
No.
Say anything about him being collegial?
No.
Okay. And during this meeting, what you did was you also asked Dr. Ralston what his routine and his practice is, right?
Correct.
And Dr. Ralston did that, correct, at the meeting?
Yes.
And subsequent to this, well, before I go any further, it's fair to say, doctor, or you would agree, that equally trained and equally qualified doctors can have two completely different opinions, right?
Yes.
And in fact, one could be right, one could be wrong, both could be wrong, and they both could be right, right?
True.
Okay. Now, Dr. Ralston is trained in internal medicine, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that Dr. Husel's trained in anesthesiology, right?
Yes.
You're also aware that he was also, and that was at the Cleveland Clinic, correct?
Yes.
And you're also aware that he had a fellowship in critical care as well, correct?
Yes.
In fact, he's the only doctor at Mount Carmel West who's both trained in critical care and anesthesiology, is he not?
That's true.
Okay, so whatever doctor you may ask at Mount Carmel about Dr. Husel's dosing habits are trained differently, are they not?
Yes.
Now, having said, after Dr. Ralston gave his way of doing things, the three of you discussed about starting a committee, right?
There was discussion about a collaborative group of people working together to design a more rigorous standard care of these types of patients. I wouldn't call it a committee.
Okay, well, pardon me for mischaracterizing it, sir, but basically what you wanted to do is develop a policy, right?
I didn't necessarily say I wanted to do that, but there was discussion about the possibility of doing that.
And you asked Dr. Husel if he would participate in that committee or whatever you want to call it.
I don't recall specifically if I asked him or Dr. Ralston asked him or he just offered, but there was discussion that if that occurred, he would be interested in participating.
And would you like to review the last sentence of the statement you made to the police?
Sure.
Let me know when you're done.
Are you speaking of the next to last sentence of the document?
No, the very last sentence of the first page.
Oh, on the first page.
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, you in fact stated to the police that Dr. Husel was supportive of the concept and agreed to be part of a group that would draft such an order set. Did you not, sir?
I did.
Now, subsequent to this, at the conclusion of this meeting, you actually patted Dr. Husel on the back and told him not to worry, that he would not lose his job. Do you recall that, sir?
No, I do not.
Okay. So, it's your testimony, sir, that you never made or implied in any way that he'd be working back in no time?
No, I could not promise that. There was still an investigation of serious matters. I could not promise that to him.
Okay. These serious matters were so serious that, of course, you wanted him to be part of this committee, correct?
I never agreed to form that group. That was the possibility that was discussed in the meeting. Okay. There was no definite decision made to do that.
Now, let's talk about how things unfolded subsequent to this. You testified about these reports that were run subsequent to this meeting, right?
Which reports are you referring to?
The reports you testified where, I guess well, let me, if I can pull that document out. You recall in the direct examination being asked about reports created by Leslie Bowman, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this a good place to break? Because you're going to get into a whole different topic and it's getting to the top of the hour.
Sure.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to excuse you to go to lunch. Remember the admonitions? I'm going to steal another half hour. Let's start it back at 1. Okay? Is that fine with everybody? Didn't ruin your dinner, your lunchtime a little bit? Cramping your style?
All rise.
Okay.
You run it, Judge.
I understand. It is my decision. I'll see you all at 1 then.
What time, Judge, what time are we looking at?
1?
1, okay.
Hold on, Doc. Don't go away yet. Okay, we're on break for lunch. You're not to discuss your testimony with anybody. I don't care if he's in the room or not. How you testified or what you testified to. Now, you can answer a factual question, but you can't get any training or anything during the break. Fair enough?
I understand.
Okay. Thank you. You're excused till 1 o'clock. Okay. Can someone turn that around for me? It's in
The parties for this procedure based on his health issues. He has to periodically, after about an hour, go lay down somewhere. He didn't want to lay down either in the back hallway or in the outside hallway or in some room at the courthouse. We all agreed this was an acceptable format, and for Mr. Baez to attack that as if some sort of ruse to avoid the rigors of his devastating cross-examination, I don't think was appropriate, and I'm going to ask for some leeway as to on the redirect as far as leading regarding that. Secondly, we would also request, again, on the record, for any expert reports that we were promised, again, last night, and we have not received yet. So,
Pot shot aside, I think, Judge, what I feel we did make the agreement that he could testify, but I don't think that I'm foreclosed from attacking that issue, especially given the fact that he's just a few blocks away. I thought he was going to be at home. I wasn't aware that he was going to be at his lawyer's office. I wasn't aware of any of that until at the I think late yesterday. So in light of that, I think that's fair game, and it's fair game for.
No, he said you did it. He wants to be able to go after it too, is what he's requesting. Well, he wants to be able to explain it away.
He can't testify for the defense, if that's what.
No, he's not trying to testify for the defense.
Okay.
He just wants to be able to ask questions along the line of, why are you there, that type of stuff.
In terms of the expert reports, there was one updated one, which I think was sent to them.
No.
Or a supplement one. No. When was that sent out?
Yeah, no, we just have a supplemental, which we did say that we would turn over to the state.
Okay, so we're turning, that one's ready to turn over. The only other one that's outstanding is the new one that we discussed at sidebar, that new expert.
Any
He's currently
anticipation?
reviewing records.
Okay.
He said he would done by either tonight or tomorrow as well.
So it will be done shortly.
Can we have a name, please?
Allison can give you that name.
I'm sorry?
We don't even know a name yet, Judge.
I'm sure we gave him a name, Judge. I'm just...
This is Taylor Mick. She's following all of this, Judge. We don't have a name yet of a...
Okay, Taylor, talk to the other one. You guys get the issue resolved. If you don't, I'll get involved.
We'll note for the record it's March 2nd, second week of trial.
I understand that. I understand I gave them leeway previously in an order and you objected. I understand.
Are we excused for
Anything
lunch?
else for the record? Okay, we're on break.
Thank you, Judge.
Hot shot aside. Come on.